I knew something was wrong the moment he walked into my server room with his shoes still wet from whatever overpriced boutique bar he'd stumbled out of. Third day on the job, and Trevor Lang was already flinging buzzwords like a frat boy throws ping pong balls. Only he missed just as often. "Why the hell is this still running on static routes?" he asked, pointing at a screen I'd configured back in 2020 that had more uptime than his resume had jobs. Who hardcodes access paths in 2025? I didn't bother answering, just tapped a few keys and let the silence remind him the system was humming long before he learned how to spell Kubernetes. Trevor liked to strut through engineering like he was blessing the underprivileged with his presence, called my team legacy, called my infrastructure duct tape on a dying ship, and called me intimidating in that forced, jokey tone men use when they're scared of competent women. I'd been with Virion Systems for 7 years. Built our cloud stack from scratch: contracts, orchestration logic, route deployments, tiered permissions. Quiet, bulletproof work. No drama, no downtime. Hell, half the back end still carried my initials in the audit trails. Some folks collect trophies. I collected infrastructure that never needed rebooting. But Trevor didn't see that. Or maybe he saw it and hated that someone like me had that kind of quiet control. He wanted transparency, which in startup speak means flattening every expert into a slide on his next pitch deck. And yeah, the writing was on the wall, but it's funny how the people pushing digital transformation never check whose name is on the license. Oh, and before I forget, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit like. It seriously helps the team keep doing what we do. 97% of you just listen without subscribing, and trust me, we see it. And yeah, it makes a difference. Now back to the mess. By the time Trevor called his first all hands, he'd already axed 3 people and reorganized the backend into some Frankenstein hybrid of microservices and AI-enhanced automation. His words, not mine. We all knew what that meant. Stripping out the stable stuff, ignoring the custom constraints we'd worked years to layer in, and replacing it with a template he downloaded from some startup influencer's Medium post. But I stayed quiet. Didn't argue, didn't gloat. Just archived every repo, snapshot, and contract copy I had access to, which, to be clear, was all of it. You see, back during our big cloud migration in 2020, the legal team gave me full administrative authority to provision and maintain the root infrastructure. It made sense. I was the one who negotiated the vendor licenses, handled procurement, and built the entire orchestration tree. They just never transferred ownership, never even asked. Everything was bound to my named user account, not IT's, not the company's, mine. Trevor never asked about that, never even looked. Too busy doing LinkedIn live streams about cultural agility. So I smiled. I kept smiling through every insult, every eye roll, every tech review where he made some grand proclamation about killing the old guard. Because I wasn't guarding anything. I was preparing for something, and all it took was one smug 3-sentence email on day 3 of my first real vacation in 5 damn years to light the fuse. I didn't even blink. Just let the breeze roll over me while the foam lapped the shore like it hadn't just chewed through the last 7 years of my life. The email sat there glowing on my screen like a mosquito bite I refused to scratch. My cappuccino was still warm. The sun hadn't even cleared the cliffside yet. I let the whole thing sit, quiet and surreal, while some German kid launched a drone nearby and a dog barked at the waves like he had a shot at winning. Trevor Lang, head of digital whatever, had just fired me by email. No call. No meeting. No, thanks for holding the system together through 6 audit cycles and a pandemic. Just a digital post-it. We've decided to let you go. And the kicker? We'll reset your credentials. Like I was some junior dev with a Jira login and a shared Slack channel. Like everything I built could be yanked off my fingers like a cheap keycard. I took another sip and watched a sailboat drift out past the breakers. I should have felt rage, panic, something, but I didn't. I felt amused. Because Trevor had no idea what those credentials were actually tied to. And more importantly, what wasn't. There's a kind of silence you only earn after years of being underestimated. And I sat in that silence for a long time, watching waves come in, watching them go. Somewhere back in New York, Someone had probably just approved my off-boarding ticket in the HR system. Some poor IT tech was likely generating a reset package for a system they didn't even know wasn't theirs to reset. That was the beautiful part of it. They'd been so eager to clear the decks, so obsessed with modernizing, they forgot the core thing. Nobody checked the ownership metadata, not once. All those cloud orchestration layers, all those production containers, all those vendor tokens and root level keys. They weren't assigned to Virion Systems. They were assigned to me, by name. I hadn't even realized how quiet the beach had gone until a gull screamed overhead. My phone buzzed again, probably IT noticing they couldn't kill my sessions. I flipped it over face down. No rush. Back in the States, it was still 5 a.m. Nobody had noticed anything yet. The dashboards were still alive, the automation jobs still humming. They hadn't expired yet, but they would, because the master cloud license that governed every containerized deployment across their multi-region environment, it was set to expire at exactly 11:59 p.m. GMT, and renewal? That required a click. From me. Trevor, in all his corporate wisdom, had just burned the only bridge he didn't even know he was standing on, and I had 12 hours left on the timer. By the time I walked back from the beach cafe, the little green dot next to Virion Slack had gone gray. I opened the app just to see, yep, access revoked. Then the cascade began. Pinged out of Jira, logged out of my admin panel. My Virion email, poof, gone. Like a magician yanking tablecloths, except they forgot I owned the damn table. They moved fast. I'll give them that. Someone was clearly following a protocol, but the protocol assumed I was disposable. That everything tied to me was stored neatly in shared credentials and centralized dashboards. That's the part that made me laugh. I mean, full body laugh. Like a bark the seagulls didn't appreciate because I knew the playbook they were following. Revoke access, rotate credentials, initiate asset handovers. It's what I would have done too if the infrastructure had actually belonged to them, but it didn't. You see, the central license, the license that provisioned every single one of our container environments across 3 continents, that gave root-level access to the orchestration layer, controlled region-spanning failovers, and authenticated every deployment token. Yeah, that was bound to me. Not adminviron.com, not infrastructure group. It was bound to my personal authenticated enterprise account under a named user contract. That little detail got buried back in 2020 when legal approved it as part of the emergency migration protocol during the ransomware scare. We just need to move fast, I remember them saying. Assign it to whoever can deploy before Monday. That was me. I signed the license, my email, my signature, my contract. I'd offered to move it later. Nobody ever followed up. And Trevor sure as hell didn't dig that deep. He saw my presence as a problem, an artifact of the old guard he was so desperate to erase. He never asked what powered the new toys he was bragging about to the board. He just assumed he could roll me out like a deprecated plug-in. They thought they'd flipped a switch. What they'd actually done was cut off the only person with the authority to renew the core infrastructure license. That license wasn't auto-renewing, it wasn't multi-auth, and it wasn't theirs. It was set to expire at midnight GMT about 8 hours from now. And when it did, their entire orchestration pipeline, dev, staging, production, analytics, client portals would all fall off a cliff like lemmings following the last cached heartbeat. No backups could save them if the containers didn't know where to spin up from. And spoiler, they didn't. I built the orchestration tree manually because automation is great, until it inherits garbage logic from the last guy trying to impress LinkedIn. They didn't know any of this. Not yet. They were probably clinking glasses in the office kitchen, celebrating the new agile era, while the system they stole from under me stood there with one hand on the plug. And guess who still had the other hand? At 12 a.m. GMT, the heartbeat stopped. Not with a bang, not even with a beep, just silence. One by one, the containerized services lost their lifeline. Authentication calls started timing out. Then came the flurry of internal alerts, those cheerful little pings that usually signaled normal deployment logs, but now they screamed in red. Token expired. Service unreachable. Access denied. And just like that, the house of cards folded. When New York woke up, the Virion homepage, a slick, over-engineered React mess that had once boasted about frictionless innovation was gone. 404, just a white screen with one sad browser default message, not found. Then came the dominoes. The API layer failed next. Calls that used to return beautifully nested JSON responses now just returned error messages, timeouts, empty objects. The client dashboards? Nothing but spinning wheels and broken widgets. I sat on my balcony with my second espresso, watching the sunrise like it was a live concert. From the other side of the world, I could practically feel the chaos unraveling. My phone started buzzing around 6:20 a.m., first a couple unknown numbers, then a few emails from Virion's vendor reps. One of them even CC'd me by accident, asking legal if they had a valid technical contact for the orchestration license on record. I didn't answer. Inside Virion HQ, panic was hitting fifth gear. Sales teams were refreshing demo links for clients and getting error pages. One of the East Coast reps sent an all-hands Slack message. Well, tried to. It never delivered. The integrations were down, so he called, then called again, and again. By 7:30, the CTO had reportedly consumed 4 Red Bulls and was pacing the floor like a man trying to outrun his own reflection. And Trevor? Trevor was shouting at a room full of engineers who didn't know what the hell he was talking about. "Restore it," he yelled. "Pull the backups. I don't care how, just get it live." Problem was, you can't restore a backup if the platform the backup needs to run on doesn't exist anymore. They thought it was a DNS issue, then they blamed expired secrets, then someone floated the idea of a coordinated attack. That's when legal got involved, because if it was a breach, they'd need to file reports, notify clients, trigger cyber insurance. But that theory didn't hold water. There was no tampering, no evidence of intrusion, no data leak, nothing was stolen. It had simply vanished. The more they searched, the more they realized the skeleton was still there, but it had no skin, no credentials, no valid provisioning token, no cloud heartbeat. The system wasn't down. It was unlicensed, an expensive, elegant corpse. By 9:00 a.m., legal had dug deep enough to ask the real question. Who was the license holder? And that, dear Trevor, is where the real fun began. The vendor rep wasn't even trying to sound sympathetic, just efficient, clinical. You could practically hear the shrug through the phone when he said it. There's no listed corporate contact. The master license was provisioned under a personal enterprise agreement, tied to a single user. Silence on the other end of the call. Then, in that thinly veiled panic tone only executives can manage, can we get access restored? That's when the rep forwarded the original onboarding PDF. It didn't come with any fanfare. No password, no watermark. Just a quiet, 4-page document with Virion's logo stamped in the top right corner and my name typed cleanly in the center. Below it, my digital signature, full timestamp, binding language, an approval clause from legal, and a short note. Authorized to act with full administrative access on behalf of Virion Systems for all provisioning, deployment, and renewal actions related to infrastructure orchestration. I'd nearly forgotten that line. It was approved during the emergency migration in 2020, when our entire back end was spiraling into ransomware hell and nobody wanted to wait for a 12-person committee to click accept. So they gave it to me. All of it. The contract had a clause for reassignment. But guess what? Nobody had ever reassigned it. The CTO was reportedly speechless, not just because the whole architecture had crumbled, but because there it was, undeniable proof that every decision they'd made over the last 36 hours had been based on the assumption that I was already irrelevant. And that assumption had just kicked them in the teeth. Trevor's face must have been a shade of red that didn't have a Pantone code, because in a single document, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the legacy holdover anymore. I was the ghost in the machine, the last line of authorization, the keystone. Worse, they'd kicked me out without a severance clause that addressed license retention. Their HR boilerplate had assumed all tools were centralized, all assets recoverable, but they weren't. I'd always followed policy, but policy never caught up with the edge cases. And I was the edge case. By now, legal had crawled every shared folder, every contract archive. They even pulled my old compliance audits. The deeper they dug, the more they realized the truth. I wasn't just part of the system. I was the system, and the system didn't run without me. You'd think Trevor would have called by now, but no, pride's a hell of a drug. Instead, they had an admin assistant send me a vague email from a generic procurement inbox. Can we schedule a time to discuss possible renewal terms? I didn't respond. Yet. I knew the moment the call came through, it wasn't going to be another assistant or vendor. It was him. Nathan Rivington, CEO of Virion Systems. The man whose name had appeared on every quarterly email I'd been auto-subscribed to for 7 years. The man I'd met maybe 3 times in person, each time shaking hands like we were both pretending I wasn't the reason the system stayed online. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Is this a bad time? No, I said, but we're past the point of polite. There was a pause, then a long breath, one of those controlled exhales you learn in executive coaching. I want to acknowledge what happened, and I want to fix it, personally. He sounded composed, even gracious, but you could hear it. Underneath the carefully curated tone was something else. Desperation. Virion wasn't just on fire, it was melting. I'll be direct, he continued. We're asking for your help. I understand you hold the original orchestration license. We're not here to argue, just to ask what it'll take. He thought he was leading the call. He wasn't. I didn't pace, didn't lecture. I just said it calmly, like I was ordering room service. First, I'm not returning as an employee. That ship sailed when your boy genius fired me from a beach chair. Silence. He didn't interrupt. Second, I said, I want a new title, Executive Infrastructure Advisor, contract-based, 6-month terms, my terms, remote only, access as needed with my rates attached, no W-2, no HR nonsense. Still nothing, but I could hear the weight shifting. And third, I added, Trevor Lang writes a formal apology, not to me. Don't insult me like that. He writes it to your board. Internal circulation, addressed to the mismanagement of infrastructure and his own negligent oversight during the license transition. The line was dead quiet, but not the kind of silence that comes with disagreement, the kind that means something's sinking in, something heavy. That's all? Nathan asked, voice tight. For now. He didn't ask to negotiate, didn't throw in legal jargon, didn't say, let me run it by the team. Just, understood. I heard him take another breath, and I knew what he was doing. Recalculating risk, weighing Trevor's ego against a collapsed platform, a dozen pissed-off clients, and whatever the financial fallout looked like by morning. Then came the follow-up. How soon can we get it restored? License kicks back in when I click a box, I said, but I won't until the paperwork hits my inbox and the apology hits yours. And just like that, the tide turned. It wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was clarity. Cold, contractual clarity. I hadn't picked this fight, but I had written the playbook. Now they could read it. At exactly 12:02 p.m. GMT, the heartbeat returned. Silent, clean, surgical, like a sleeping giant finally exhaling. No fanfare, no announcement, just green lights cascading down the dashboard as if nothing had ever gone wrong. But everything had gone wrong, and everyone knew it. The containers began to rehydrate one by one. Front end, back end, auth layers, analytics nodes, every system blinked back to life like a defibrillated corpse. API call logs scrolled again. Client dashboards returned to their smug, data-filled glory. The Virion homepage loaded without error for the first time in 20 hours. To most of the staff, it probably looked like a miracle. But to Trevor Lang, it was a death sentence. When I checked the internal comms later that evening, his name had already disappeared from Slack. His badge access? Disabled. His company profile page? 404. User not found. There was no public firing. No announcement, just quiet removal like a bad deployment rolled back without ceremony. His office door was already open. Empty desk. Half a LaCroix can still sweating into a coaster. That's the thing about people like Trevor. They vanish the same way they manage, quickly, noisily, and with no backups. An hour later, a memo went out company-wide. Please welcome our new strategic infrastructure consultant. No name attached, just the title, clean. Intentional. By then, the paperwork was finalized. 6-month consulting agreement, reviewed by legal, approved by the board. My title wasn't what mattered. It was the contract language. It gave me what I wanted: complete operational autonomy, final sign-off authority on cloud decisions, and veto power on all future platform changes. They couldn't touch the architecture without my signature. My new desk wasn't where it used to be. They didn't stick me back in the basement near the cooling ducts and humming power supplies. This one was on the top floor, corner suite, windows on 2 sides, no nameplate, just a single sheet of paper taped to the door. Plain white, black text, bold font, fatal, access denied for user not listed. Someone thought they were being funny. I thought it was perfect. Inside, everything was quiet. No clutter, no leftover files, no inherited mess. Just a clean desk, a fresh login, and the echo of a system that now ran the way it should have always run: modular, secure, bulletproof. People passed my door that day like it was radioactive. A few junior devs nodded. One whispered something to another. Word spreads fast when someone disappears, and the ghost that replaced them has full platform keys. Nobody said Trevor's name. They didn't have to. The system was back online, and so was I. I spent the next 6 weeks laying the foundation like it was sacred ground. I didn't touch the old system, didn't so much as peek at a backup. That structure had rotted from the inside, infected by short-term egos and half-baked shortcuts. No sense resurrecting something designed by committee and broken by neglect. Instead, I rebuilt everything, from zero. Each service re-architected with redundancy in mind. Clean container stacks, modular failover logic, nothing hard-coded, nothing orphaned. Every key had a mirror, every access point had traceability. Even the sandbox environments followed real-world protocols. I wasn't just writing code, I was building a legal fortress in infrastructure form. The master license, now corporate-owned, triple authenticated, with automated expiry reminders 6 months in advance. I even built a small script that would ping legal, IT, and my own inbox simultaneously if any root token hadn't been touched in 30 days. They laughed at first. They stopped laughing when the script flagged a dormant admin account that no one remembered existed. It had full permissions. We deleted it. Together. Documentation became religion. I didn't accept verbal sign-offs. Everything was written. Git commits, architecture diagrams, dependency logs. If someone wanted a change pushed, they had to walk through the audit protocol, live, with me watching. I hosted a company-wide seminar the day the last module went live. Trevor's name wasn't mentioned, but the undertone was clear. I stood in front of a packed Zoom room with every department dialed in: engineering, sales, legal, even the damn board had a rep sitting in. Title of the deck: Digital Access is Not an Afterthought. And they listened. They really listened. I broke it down like a story, not just what went wrong, but why it went wrong. How the obsession with speed and cost-cutting had slowly bled the company dry of ownership clarity. How infrastructure without oversight is like a bridge with no blueprint. Looks fine until you put weight on it. At the end, during Q&A, a junior engineer raised his hand. Fresh hire, smart eyes, probably still shaking off the shock of being hired mid-chaos. He asked, "Why didn't you fight back sooner? When they let you go, I mean. You knew what would happen." It was a good question. I looked at him, let the silence hang just long enough for everyone to lean in a bit, and then I said it plainly. Because no one resets signatures carved into compliance contracts. A few people chuckled, but most just nodded because they got it. This wasn't about revenge. It was about design. The kind of design that doesn't just survive leadership turnover, but neutralizes it, where every credential tells a story and every system carries the memory of the hand that built it. I didn't need to scream. I just needed them to watch the page go blank, and then watch who brought it back. They held the board update in the same glass-walled conference room where Trevor once declared he'd modernize everything by Q3. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The blinds were drawn now, not for secrecy, but because no one wanted the reflection of that day bouncing back at them. The CIO led with numbers: downtime duration, projected loss, actual loss, client retention percentage. Then he paused and did something rare. He stopped reading, looked up, said my name without being prompted. And then, if she hadn't architected the recovery protocols, we'd still be down. She didn't just bring us back. She rebuilt us safer. I didn't smile, just nodded slightly. An investor rep from Kestrel Capital leaned forward. And what about long-term redundancy, contingency? The CEO, same man who'd called me from his corner office with his voice tight and apology ready, didn't hesitate. He gestured toward me like I was both the sword and the shield. She wrote the new protocols, he said. Everything we run now is under her architecture. That should have been the end of it. But someone had gone one step further. Right there, mounted between the flat screens and the whiteboard, was a framed screenshot. Clean. Centered. No caption. Just the original 404 page that greeted the world when the system collapsed. In the bottom left corner, barely visible unless you knew to look, was a single line of fine print. My old provisioning signature, left over from a time when I hadn't bothered to scrub my name off the base templates. It read, "Infrastructure provisioned by my name, effective through 11:59 p.m. GMT, unless renewed." Nobody said a word about it. They didn't have to. They all saw it. Everyone in that room understood what it meant. That line had once been ignored, buried beneath layers of arrogance and assumption. Now it was behind glass, untouchable, unedited. The final slide of the presentation was a new banner for our internal code base. I hadn't asked for it. Someone in marketing must have done it out of quiet respect. It just said, "Don't mistake quiet for replaceable." I gathered my things after the meeting, didn't linger. No handshake parade, no backpats, just a steady walk down the hallway, past engineers who didn't meet my eyes but stood a little straighter as I passed. Outside, the city was loud, but inside that company, my silence still echoed.